Welcome back, everybody, to the Colorado Victim Advocate Podcast. I'm Randy Saucedo. This podcast is sponsored by Intervention, Inc. We are a Colorado-based nonprofit organization created in 1986. We provide a range of services in the criminal and social justice system. Our podcast highlights the wonderful and necessary work of the Colorado victim advocacy community. We also bring awareness to the survivors and victors over domestic violence. Their experiences are what really does show the terrible experience, but how it can be used for good and as an inspiration for others who might be in similar circumstances. While domestic violence and abuse, it obviously can occur at any time. Sometimes it shows when the victim is most vulnerable, when their children are preparing for a time that many enjoy and look forward to, especially now during the season going back to school. As we know, it's a time when kids are looking to reconnect with their friends, learn new things. It's a time when parents often have more stressors than ever. We know that. It can include the cost of getting kids new clothes or school supplies, or whether or not they can afford to do so. This can lead to additional stress in the home, and when violence is already present, it can get worse. And today we are very happy to have back with us Stacy with us, and we'll be talking about that time when back to school can sometimes mean back to domestic violence, sadly. So welcome again, Stacy. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me back today and letting me share about this topic.
And it really is, as I said, it can be a really great time for kids because, kids, they want to go back to school, summer's done and, but then you have the stress that comes with that. And so as a survivor and certainly a victor over domestic violence, let's talk about some of those things that can add to the stress of going back to school and your family. I mean, first, just kind of give us a little bit of a talk about some of the things that you had to deal with when that time came up, when back to school was getting ready to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it was the financial. That's where the financial abuse portion kind of kicks in because it's a stressor, having the money or having the money withheld to be able to get what your kids need, or having to ask or basically beg, because some of the forms of that abuse financially is them withholding the funds or making you feel like you have to beg.
Or you have to feel like you have to earn it in some way.
Right.
And I think, too, when you look at that, I mean, just how did that make you feel like internally? I mean, because some, folks that I've spoken to, they said, it just made me feel like less than a person, that I'm having to beg, earn, something that should be communal in a household.
Right. Yeah, for me, it was more of just have to make the decision of, okay, do I pay this bill or do I pay for my kids' activity fees or, get the backpack that they really want that's going to make them feel, stellar about returning back to school.
They got new things.
Exactly. So having to make those decisions of whether or not I'm going to pay for something in the household or allocate that towards the kids in secret,
And, and that's so sad when you in secret,
right?
Because, domestic violence, in many ways, it is a secretive thing, I mean, it's not like a bank robbery, there's a bunch of witnesses and a camera. I mean, this occurs internally and you just, the secretive piece about it, that must have been really hard.
Absolutely. It was such a strain on my life having to know that my kids are going to school and not being able to focus at times, thinking about, a fight or an incident that they might have heard, or, maybe we were arguing in the car on the way to drop them off, and now they're just thinking about the argument. Is my mom safe now that I'm at school, and is she going to be okay? And they're worried all day about their parents.
Absolutely. And and there's the transference, that there's the experiencing of trauma now with your kids,
Right.
because now they're worried and they can't concentrate. And
Right.
so, when that happens, I mean, were you able to talk to your kids about that, letting them know that you were going to be okay, or possibly, giving some type of warning or something?
I was able to, sit them down and say, how are things? How do you feel?
Good.
How is this affecting you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, is there something that you want to talk to me about?
Mm-hmm.
And one of my kids actually voiced to me that the lockers closing at school was like a trigger. It was
Mm.
like startled them. You know what I
Incredible,
mean?
incredible. A big noise like that,
Yeah.
and people don't realize that, that those are things that trigger people.
Hmm.
I mean, a loud noise, a loud bang and something like that. How was she able to deal with it?
Just, taking that time to realize, okay, I'm at school.
Hmm.
This isn't an abusive something that's happening at home. And really just taking those breaths and saying, hey, okay, I need to calm myself down, self-soothe. My mom's okay,
Hmm.
but realizing the fact that the locker closing or the teacher, gets loud with the class because they want everyone to sit down. And the yelling is like,
Yeah,
oh my God, we're getting yelled at. You know what I
of
mean?
course,
So,
of course.
um,
Because I mean, it happened at home. It
right,
happens at home.
right, exactly. So, that was something that was my focus with my children when they went back.
Hmm.
And it's something that I hear a lot of, women, their children have the same thing,
Hmm.
um, just different things that trigger them at school, or the teachers are not seeing that this child might have, something going on at home because
Hmm.
it's secretive.
Absolutely.
They're not telling their friends, hey, my mom's getting beat up at home. They're trying to think of everything else to talk about so no one knows that that's what they're experiencing.
And that truly just really it just continues to ingrain the secrecy, the violence of the trauma that's going on at home, whenever the kids are doing this. So obviously, you're seeing a noticeable change, in the kids. And how did you talked about that for a few moments? You said, how you dealt with them to let them know that you were going to be okay.
Yeah. Just making sure to have that open line of communication,
Mm-hmm.
letting them know, and communicating with the school, not to say, hey, this is going on, but
Exactly.
be aware that my child is a little sensitive to, yelling
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, so they can know maybe they might have to take a little time out
Mm-hmm.
and go get themselves together. Maybe they might need to call me, if they're having high stress or
Mm-hmm.
thinking that I might not be okay. Like, they might need to go to the office and just give me a buzz and, get themselves
Mm-hmm.
together, say, hey, my mom's okay. Okay, now I can focus on the math quiz.
Sure. And a lot of times too, that's just something that, parents, who are experiencing that type of trauma, that type of environment and abuse, um, that's not something that they think of. And that's really great that you bring that forward, because those are simple steps.
Right.
Those are simple things to do. It's like, hey, look, especially now with the advent of cell phones in school,
Mhm.
hey, my kid might need a moment just to call me to make sure everything is okay.
Right.
And, so, with regards to that, I mean, how did you deal with that the moment that the kids left, you know, and went to school, and you were there at home and you were still having to deal with these issues? Because while we know that domestic violence is prevalent and it can continue and manifest in different ways, there must have been times in which you could try to figure out some things for yourself while the kids weren't there.
Most of the time, I really was reflecting on how I can make a change to kind of get out of this situation. You know what I'm
Sure,
saying? While they're
absolutely.
at school, I'm researching resources and, figuring out how we could pivot in this
Mm-hmm.
situation and not stay in this situation.
Just looking for, possibly even to use the word, an escape plan.
Right. Exactly.
And in many ways too, you just feel like, okay, the kids are at school. I can now look at it like this. I can now kind of plan a little bit more. Was that something that you were able to, really start to look at concrete measures?
I was and I wasn't at the same time. Like I stated before in our previous times,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have that escape plan. That when I left, it was just like we're leaving. You know what I mean?
It's time to
Everything
go.
went out the window that I
Sure.
thought about,
The
or
planning.
everything, all of that. It
Mm-hmm.
just it flatlined out of my brain.
Sure.
So it was just like we have to go, but it still was ingrained
Mm-hmm.
inside of me, even though I didn't have the piece of paper that said, okay, step by step, this is the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But with them being at school, I did have a lot more time to think to myself, okay, if something ever happens while they're at school, who can pick them up?
Sure.
Who's okay to be a safe person?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that is what I took into consideration.
And you talked about that just for a moment, about because I know with victims at that time and children at that time, we didn't like to talk about what was going on in our home.
Mhm.
But you talked about that for a moment of saying, about why your child might need to take a moment. Were there folks that, or were there people, or what was kind of the atmosphere that you felt like you could or couldn't tell a little bit more about what was going on?
Yeah, so the school counselor, I reached out to her
Mm-hmm.
at my kid's school.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I didn't go really too deep into it. I just
Course.
let her know that we're in a situation that I'm trying to navigate through
Mm-hmm.
at the moment. And if she could just support me a little bit harder and support my children a little bit more. Um, and then she kind of communicated that to the teachers and the rest of the staff.
Okay. Okay.
So she, let them know, hey, be on the lookout. And,
Mm-hmm.
if this happens, don't go to the extreme because this kid is kind of dealing with some things at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it put them on the radar for the school to be aware that, things were going the way that they were going.
And that's something too, I mean, because, I guess for kids, and certainly too for people who are experiencing that, that there is a level of shame.
Mhm.
You just feel like in many ways, wow, I'm having to tell somebody something so personal,
Right,
so deep, and, but I don't want to go too far.
right.
And is that something, I mean, kind of, you just talked a little bit about that. And how would you, if you're talking to somebody in the work that you do, how would you tell them as to what to say? Would you say exactly what you just said to them?
I would let them know to still keep, what they want to keep inside, but
Mm-hmm.
make it obvious that there's something going on
Mm-hmm.
so their children can be on the radar, so their household can be on the radar
Mm-hmm.
of if something ever happens, this is the protocol for my child.
Okay.
Like, this is the person you can call that's going to be a safe person that they can
That's good.
stay with.
That's good.
Because a lot of the times the schools don't know that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or they have the abuser listed.
Exactly.
And then, and so you have to let them know, yeah, even though they're on here to pick them up, this is what's going on. And I'm in the process of kind of removing them. And if something happens, here is who I want my kids to be with, and not be fooled if this person comes and picks them up.
Stacy, and what you just said, it truly reminds me of just some of the work that we do in this field. And tragically, you know, when some people have said, if something happens to me, this person did it. And it really did sound like for a moment you were about to say something like that.
Right.
You know, I mean, because we've seen stories like that, you know, all the time. If nobody knows where I am, this is what happened.
Yes, right, exactly. And that's how it was. It was almost like, okay, without me calling the cops and saying, okay, there's an emergency. This is my backup plan for the school knows, you know, if something happens, look at this person, you know?
Yes.
And please don't release my kids to them.
Yes. You know, and it's so tragic that you have to think of that.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, you know, too many times, and of course that, you know, very much leads to, you know, when people say, oh, you know, she's just crazy or things like that. It's like, but this person put you in that situation,
Right.
you know, and how did you really try to maintain that balance, that mental balance of trying to be a person, trying to be a mom, and then without going over, you know, to, you know, just what people assume is being a crazy person.
That is a really hard balance to keep,
Exactly.
I have to admit. And it came a lot with just centering and meditating. I owe a lot of my balance practice to meditation.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And you know when did you think that was something that you could use?
Let me see.
Or at least under what circumstances?
When I would be alone, you know, when an event just happened and I'm by myself, you know, the kids are not around and I'm here with myself thinking all of these thoughts, you know, and I just started to go internal. Like, okay, just calm your mind down. We can get through this. You know, I started to be kind to myself for
Good.
The decisions, you know, giving myself some grace and saying, hey, we will get through this and we are going to get out of it. And I knew that inside all along that I wasn't going to stay in that.
Did you, you know, and in doing so, because I think that's really important for people who are going through that. It's like, you know, you really have to give yourself some time, some space internally to try to figure out what's your next step.
Right.
And you're having so many different steps at a time. And it sounds to me like, you know, you were able to do that, but it was a process.
Definitely. It was definitely a process. And I just had to take it one day at a time, honestly.
And, you know, when you were doing that, did your kids notice anything different about you, or was that just something that you wanted to try to do internally?
A lot of it was internal. They would see me, you know, pray a lot.
Good.
And we would pray together, you know, and just have some type of foundation bigger than the situation we were in.
That's good. That's good. Realizing that there's certainly a higher point, something that you could look to hang on to internally.
Right.
You know, and so with regards to that, in talking about that, while all the things that you're having to go through during this time, you know, going back to school, you touched on that, and we talked a little bit about that at the very beginning. With regards to the financial situation, you know, the financial stressors, how are you able to work through that with regards, because it means there might be some people who are listening out there and thinking that as an advocate, what can I tell this person?
Right.
Who's going through exactly what you're going through. I mean, how were you able to go through it?
Well, I would let them know to utilize the school. You know,
Good.
they are there to help their community. At least they're supposed to be there to help their community. So it is embarrassing in the beginning to put that out on Front Street that you're having issues at home. But the moment that I opened up and let the counselor know that
Mm-hmm.
we had things going on,
Mm-hmm.
they came out of the woodworks with
Oh,
resources,
that's wonderful.
and
Good.
so I found that I was in a position to where, okay, maybe I can trust these people, and,
Trust.
maybe I can depend on them for resources so I don't have to ask the abuser
Sure.
and feel like I'm getting financially abused.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just realized that the school was definitely somewhere that I could lean on.
That's wonderful, because I mean, you're right. And you talked about that with regard to the issue of trust, because, the trust level is something that a lot of victims, they just don't know who to trust.
Right.
Trust with the information, trust with your kids,
Right.
trust with yourself. And, when you did have that trust, that took a long time, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not built overnight. And then you have the fear of, okay, if I do open up to the school and let them know, then maybe they're gonna report that I'm unfit to have these kids. And
Exactly.
now I'm
Or make the
dealing with
situation worse.
right. And that was the case in the beginning. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I opened up to a school staff member
Mm-hmm.
who wasn't really helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and it shut me down for a long time. And not made it didn't ma- it made me not want to go back to the school.
Sure.
But when those resources were so constrained and I didn't have anywhere else to go, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, my kids don't have the school supports because we can't afford it.
Sure.
So can you guys help me? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have the person that you can trust. But yeah, it's people out there who can make the situation worse. And then the kids are like, why did you let my school know?
Yeah.
Now everybody knows at the school because this person is not really holding the information secret.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're exposed.
Yes. And that just, that now adds to the layer of, the children who are now having to deal with what you're dealing with.
Right.
And with regards to that, whenever there was like, because you touched on that as well too, like school events, parent teacher conferences or some type of event that your child is involved in,
Mhm.
how were you able to deal with that, with regards to, a parent teacher conference? Was there ever anything, that was coming up that you were concerned about, during, a conference or something like that? Was there somebody saying, well, where's the parent, where's the father, that kind of
Right.
thing?
Right. Most of the time I went to those conferences alone
Mm-hmm.
just to um, keep the peace. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Because sometimes a teacher would voice that, okay, your kid's kind of quiet or they're
Mm-hmm.
reserved or is something going on at home? And
Of
soon as they
course.
start asking, is something going on at home?
Mm-hmm.
Then
Then your red flags come out.
yes, exactly. And then you're there with the person, and
Uh-huh.
both of you are trying to look like nothing's going on at home, and the professional knows.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I
That's
just
that
went
that's
to those
actually
by
that's
myself.
very interesting that you bring that up. Because I bet a lot of people don't realize that they can go do this themselves. Did you feel in some ways almost empowered that you were accomplishing something on your own?
Yes, and it felt like, okay, well, I don't have to have permission to go to a parent teacher conference because it's my duty as a parent.
Exactly. Yes.
So it's like, yay.
I'm showing up.
Right,
I'm being present.
right, right,
And I think that's really important too, because, you're right. It does bring up those red flags, the moment that somebody
hmm
starts asking you a question
right.
like that. And you're right, keeping the peace. So I think that's a really good point, to just say, no, I'll go do it. I can take care of it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's also the time where I got to build the trust relationships
Very
and
good.
know, okay, is this teacher someone that I can have
Hmm.
on my side, or is this someone that'll make the situation worse?
Yes, and it appears to me like you were able to, I don't know, make a good contact with
Yes.
somebody at that moment.
Yes.
And, and continuing to make those contacts with people, did that kind of like help build internally your trust mechanism or people that you can't trust? Because obviously with domestic violence, a lot of trust is broken out there.
Right.
The broken trust of this is a person who I've joined with for my whole life, and now
Mhm.
we're going through something that I can't trust anybody. Did you feel like you were just starting to build trust with folks or other parents?
I felt like I was able to build that trust with the school,
Mm-hmm.
and just let my children know that, okay, they could see me communicating with the teacher, just being a little bit more open and not so reserved. And then that gave them the okay to say, hey, I need to take a minute. I
Mm-hmm.
need to go call my mom. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That let them know that that was a safe person for them when they're in the building.
Mm-hmm. And that's really that's really a great place to let people know what's going on, but
Mhm.
not too much of what's going on. Because you're right, there might be those people that will just overreact,
Right.
maybe out of ignorance, maybe out of fear or something like that. And, a lot of times too, we go back to the trust.
Right.
And it just sounds like, you were able to get to that point. But I mean, what else were you having to deal with during this time with, during what was that, what else was coming up, that added to stress during this time?
Um, I mean, just the day to day of dropping kids off, picking them
Of
up.
course, because those are
Sometimes,
stressors, just getting them up in the
yeah.
morning, getting,
And having the hectic situation of morning routine,
uh-huh,
and that can cause stress. But if your abuser doesn't want you to leave the house,
exactly.
then, you know, they don't want to let you drive the kids to school because they think that you're gonna leave. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah. Oh,
So now you
absolutely.
can't even drive the kids to school on your
Mm-hmm.
own.
Mm-hmm. Because they want to know, excuse me, they want to know where you're going.
Right,
How long are you going to be gone?
right,
That kind of thing.
right. Exactly. And then that becomes a stressor all in its own. Is that, okay, I can't even drop my kids off at school. Now
Mm.
everyone's tense in the car because,
And the kids can't, they can't
right,
be functional in some ways at school.
right.
And when you were having to, how did you deal with that?
Honestly, I would play nice and
Of course.
just, hey, if this is what it is, this is what it is. Gonna play nice.
Mm-hmm.
We have to all ride to school together just to keep the peace.
Absolutely. And in many ways, you kind of just saying, I'm doing the best I can with what I
Mhm.
have right now.
Mhm.
And, and sometimes that's probably just the best way to do it. It's like, look, externally, this is what I'm doing, but internally, this is how I'm feeling.
Right.
And what were those internal feelings, when you were having to keep the peace, even just for the moment of driving the kids and dropping them off and then driving back home?
Internally, it was a feeling of don't be so stuck on what I'm doing in the moment. Like, I know what's going on.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, don't get sidetracked of why we're playing
Uh-huh.
dice,
Uh-huh.
you know?
Sure.
Um, and that's what I thought about. Like, okay, we're doing this because we're keeping the peace. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yay, mom, you're keeping the peace.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And there's nothing wrong with that.
it's nothing wrong with keeping the peace. But
Mm-hmm.
then you find you've done all this keeping the peace all day, and something still will initiate an event.
Mm-hmm. And that too, when you're keeping the peace, when you're doing all those things, you just almost feel like you're so drained
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And yet you keep going and going and going. And
Yes.
I think that's something too that too many people who are experiencing abuse, they just don't realize that that is taxing as well. And
Exactly.
was that kind of how you started to get into, meditation and trying to have, an inner peace?
That's exactly how I got into it. Feeling the anxieties
Mm-hmm.
of, okay, is something gonna, when is there gonna be something else going on? Waiting for
Sure.
that next shoe to drop. It was always like,
What's
so
next?
feeling that inside is why I started to take the breaths
Mm-hmm.
and do the breathing work and try and get my mind out of where I was. It was my way of kind of going somewhere else.
Sure. Absolutely. And in doing so, even for those few moments of going somewhere else in your mind, that really just kind of like, okay, I'm safe at this moment.
Right.
And I'm feeling like there isn't any stress. And
Hmm.
and I think those are things that too many people don't take the time to do. And
Right.
I think that's something that we really need to bring awareness to people about that because that helps your own mental health.
Absolutely. And you're able to let your kids know of a different coping mechanism.
That's good.
And
Hmm.
so my kids saw me, doing yoga and doing the breath work and sitting there in stillness and silence. And they learned how to do yoga and breath
That's
work and
wonderful.
sit there in silence and be healed in that moment, if
Hmm.
even if it was just for that moment,
Hmm.
you know?
And that's good because when they're doing all those things, they can feel like they can achieve at school because that's
Mhm.
something important to them. That's a day-to-day thing for them now, and they feel like, if I can do this, I can do this as well.
Right. Right.
And I would probably say too, with regards to that, as we come to, the close on this, um, kind of give me, your, or at least tell people, not only people who are going through this, but as advocates, how would you be talking to somebody, about not so much some advice, but some practical information as to how to get through this very difficult time, because it is a difficult time.
Absolutely. Yeah, just for the people going through it, also the educators, if there's any educators that
Mm-hmm.
may hear this, like being aware of signs and things like that to reach out to parents. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes all they need is someone to reach out to them and say, "Hey, I noticed this was going on. Is this
Mm-hmm.
something you want to talk about? Or is there resources you may need?"
Mm-hmm.
Letting them know that they can lean on the school, letting them know that, um, they're there.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone going through it as an advocate, I just basically like to tell them that never give up on trying to find those people that are gonna be there for you
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
because they do exist. Like
Mm-hmm.
the support is out there. But you can't find it if you're just stuck in the house thinking that nobody's ever going to care about your situation because it's so common, and it is
Absolutely.
common.
And it's just a real, almost a normal side
It
effect.
is. And some people think, "Oh, well, I don't want to tell anyone that this is happening. No one's going to care because
Mm-hmm.
it's happening to everyone."
Yeah.
And they lose sight that there are people out there that are waiting to help,
Mm-hmm.
have the resources,
Mm-hmm.
and they need you to step up and take that one step of courage and say, "I need some help.
Mm-hmm.
I need some support. I need whatever it is you need."
Sure.
You have to have that voice for yourself and advocate for yourself first.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really a great point to bring this to a close because looking at that, you're advocating for yourself because in a
Mhm.
lot of ways you have to. And you're advocating obviously for your kids because you have to.
Absolutely.
And that might give somebody the strength, the inner strength to say, okay, maybe I don't want this to my relationship to end, but maybe I can figure some things out.
Right.
Or like you said, having that time to think, maybe this is time to move on. Maybe I need to do something else. And I think that's where you reach out to people, those people that want to help. And, they're out there. It just needs somebody, to take that step. And I think that's really great that you've been able to talk about this, because this is such an important topic. And I truly want to thank you, Stacy, because, this is something that, we always, as advocates, we deal with, but not people just don't talk about it.
Right.
And I really want to thank you for being here today with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Here at Intervention, the services that we provide for folks, justice involved folks, in the post-conviction phase of the criminal justice system, but also too with comprehensive victim services. If you'd like more information about us, you can go to our website at www.int-cjs.org, and the Colorado Victim Advocate podcast. We can be found on Spotify or on our YouTube channel. And we hope you join us for another episode. Thank you so much for being with us today. I want to close and say that victims advocates, we're a noun, we're a subject, we're a verb, and we're an adjective. And thank you so much for listening today.